Does it get any more iconic than this? Camaro SS versus Mustang GT. Of course, these days, these are no ordinary pony cars. Both of these cars have their brand's respective track day performance packages. This being the Camaro SS 1LE, and that is the Ford Mustang GT with the Performance Package. For your extra $7,000, the 1LE package takes the Camaro SS with its 6.2-liter naturally aspirated V8 and 6-speed manual transmission and throws a bunch of track day goodies at it. Massive brakes, massive wheels and tires, upgraded cooling, uprated suspension, a bunch of chassis tweaks, and of course, GM's fabulous MagnaRide suspension. Then there's the Ford Mustang GT Performance Pack. Although I need to clarify, Ford offers two performance packs for the Mustang GT. They have the Performance Pack 1 and the Performance Pack 2. This is the entry-level Performance Pack 1, and for an extra $4,000, it gives you the cool 19-inch wheels, large Brembo brakes, uprated suspension, and interestingly, a spoiler delete, as well as a 373 rear-end Torsen window slip diff. So I'm driving the Ford Mustang GT Performance Pack 1, and right away, this Mustang has a very old-school muscle car feel to it. Of course, nowadays it's very modern. It has fully independent suspension front and rear and a very modern 5-liter V8 engine with variable valve timing and decent fuel efficiency and all that stuff. But the feeling is very old school. The steering is kind of wooden. The clutch has a sort of heavy, non-linear bite to it. The shifter is not nearly as tight as the Camaro. But the sound this thing makes is straight out of the 1970s. It sounds like an old school touring car, especially with the windows down. Whatever Ford has done to that exhaust system, as well as this engine with its super sharp intake sound, is great. It's such a throwback. Which is interesting because the Camaro has the much bigger engine, but this sort of sounds more like old school muscle car. Man, that engine and that intake noise is just so brutal sounding. Rev out to 7,400 RPM for a big V8 is just nutty. While we're on the topic of powertrains, much like the Camaro, this Ford Mustang GT has very long gearing. Even with the Performance Pack 373 Torsen rear end, second gear goes to like 75 miles an hour, and the third looks like it goes to like roughly 100. It's not only is the gearing still quite long, but the gear spacing is actually a bit different. While the Chevy's is nice and closely spaced, the Ford Mustang seems to have slightly longer spacing between the gears. And now normally that would be fine, but the Ford Mustang does seem to have a bit of rev hang, which is a bit of a disappointment. It's not bad, obviously there are some cars that are terrible about it, but it does have a little bit, which does create, much like the clutch, a sort of non-linear sensation in the powertrain. Additionally, this Ford does not rev up nearly as fast as the Chevy, which is a bit disappointing considering this has 900 more RPM to play with, which is like a large margin. It's like 15% more revs than the Chevy. But it takes longer to rev the engine up, so when you're downshifting, you have to wait longer. Ready? objectively that's okay, but when you compare it against the Chevy, which is razor sharp and revs up super fast, the difference is noticeable. So it's interesting comparing the Performance Pack variants of these two cars. While the 1LE is definitely the track day special, it's super hooked up at all times, this Performance Pack 1 Mustang really isn't. It's running on a lot less tire than the Chevy. This has a 255 40/19 up front and a 275 35/19 out back. The Chevy's rocking a 285 30/20 up front and a 305 30/20 out back. So the Chevy has a lot more footprint, and when the cars weigh about the same, that clearly shows the amount of available grip and poise. The Mustang feels more on its toes, it kind of dances around, which on the street is actually more fun because it sort of gives a sensation of liveliness. While the Chevy's always hooked up, the Ford Mustang wants to play a little bit. That said, in terms of performance packages, the Chevy's is a much more comprehensive overhaul, and the car does feel more hooked up and ready to rock at all times. It seems that if you were a novice driver, the Ford Mustang would be a little bit more intimidating to drive compared to the Chevy. In terms of interiors, both of these cars have come a long way. They all have nice leather-wrapped materials. There's a padded dashboard, a lot of neat materials, things going on here. Both cars have a lot of instrumentation. They'll tell you all the information you'll ever need to know about a car. Oil pressure, oil temperature, water temperature, transmission temperature, diff temperature, brake application, vacuum. It tells you everything you could ever possibly want to know about your car, so they're both equally good there. That said, the Chevy has a better handle on the touch points. Now when I'm in this car, it feels okay, it feels pretty nice, but the shifter feels a bit cheaper compared to the Chevy with its nice Alcantara knob. In general, it's the things you touch. There's more buttons, this feels busier than the Chevy. But hey, it sounds really good. We also need to talk about price tags. While both these cars are around about $50,000, there is a $3,000 disparity between the two of them. I guess that's what happens when Ford offers a Performance Pack 1 and a more expensive Performance Pack 2, and Chevy just offers the 1LE. This car is 48 grand, the Chevy's 51. Both are equally fuel inefficient. They both get right around 15 miles to the gallon when you drive them as they're supposed to be driven. I'm in the Camaro SS 1LE, and right away I feel much more comfortable. The seating position is so much lower. These Recaro bucket seats are supremely comfortable. The Ford seems to have this problem where even when the seat's in its lowest setting, it feels like you're sitting on top of the hood rather than looking out from behind it. This Chevy has an excellent seating position, which is all the better to operate this car. The transmission and the engine in this thing, the powertrain package in the 1LE is perfect. The clutch is perfect. The way it's weighted, its motion, and the clutch is absolute perfection. The shifter is perfect. The nice Alcantara knob controls a amazingly direct shifter, and it just makes you want to row the gears constantly. Oh, and unlike the Ford, I can actually heel and toe in the Camaro. So I mentioned the Mustang has a really cool Trans Am sound. Clearly, the Camaro is not lacking. This thing sounds amazing. Oh! Oh! And if you'll notice, I'm way up in the rev band. I'm way up this thing, pushing it way harder than I am the Mustang. While the Mustang's fun because it moves around a lot, this is just so much faster. So the Ford Mustang GT has a 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 that makes 460 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. This Camaro SS has a 6.2-liter LT1 V8 that makes 455 horsepower and 455 pound-feet of torque. It also makes an amazing sound. The thing to keep in mind is area under the curb. While the Chevy has an extra 35 foot-pounds of torque over the Mustang, it also makes the majority of that torque way down low in the power band. The Mustang is obviously not torque deficient, it's still a V8 pony car, but this has so much more down low grunt, which gives it that feeling of never-ending power. This thing picks up right off idle and just goes. To that end, I was sitting in traffic and I decided to test that out. So I put it in 6th gear at 40 miles an hour. The Camaro was at 800 RPM, and with a light poke of the throttle, just picked up and went. Just like that. I don't think the Mustang's gonna match that feat. I mentioned before, the Mustang has a really fun engine that sounds like an old school Trans Am race car, but the transmission's kind of a mixed bag. I think the big difference is not only one, is this a much nicer transmission and a much more robust transmission, but it comes down to the gear spacing. Both of these cars have really long gearing. Both of these cars, second gear goes like 75 and third goes like 100. But the spacing between the gears, I'm not sure if it's a final drive difference, a tire size difference, or just a gearing and the transmission difference. But the tighter gear spacing in the Chevy, combined with the fact that it has no rev hang, unlike the Ford, means there's no pause or delay between your shifts. Push the car hard, shift, done. That's it. There's no wait, there's no pause. Which means, with this car, you're just on it all the time! Then there's the steering. While I mentioned the Mustang steering is kind of wooden, an old school muscle car, the Chevy steering isn't. It's perfect! Oh, much like the powertrain package, this steering is so delightfully weighted. It has so much feedback through those much larger and much grippier tires. Interestingly, both the Camaro SS 1LE and this particular Mustang GT Performance Pack have Magna-Ride suspension. That said, it's standard on the 1LE, and it's an extra $1,400, I believe, on the Mustang GT Performance Pack 1. So that does bring Ford's Performance Pack price up a little bit to try and close the gap, at least a little bit, between that and the Camaro. It's worth noting that although they both have the same adaptive ride control, They both have MagnaRide. It's both adjustable between different driving modes, but that kind of talk between comfort and performance. The way they work in the real world is so different. The Mustang, regardless of settings, does seem to kind of bobble around a little bit, and there's just none of that in the Camaro. If you have it in tour mode, it's really good at soaking up bumps. Like in the daily drive, it's comfortable. And the Ford's comfortable too, but it just seems like the Camaro has that extra ounce of refinement and quality in the body motions and the suspension tuning. Likewise, when you crank up those MagnaRide dampers and ask the car to do sporty things, the Camaro does a better job. I mentioned in the Mustang that it likes to move around a lot, and at low speeds, that's fun. But it does lead to a certain amount of unpredictability and uncertainty in the absolute limits of grip in that car. You're never quite sure, am I close to the limit? And then you find out the tires are howling, usually the front ones first, and then you realize, uh-oh, I'm out of grip. This Chevy, none of that. Not only does it have more mechanical grip, I think the suspension's better tuned, and obviously it has the much larger wheel and tire package with stickier tires. But the breakaway characteristics of this car, the way it lets the grip go, is very linear, very smooth. When you do reach the limits of adhesion in the Chevy, one, you're going much faster than the Ford, and two, it's easier to control the car. Now, credit's where it's due. Both of these cars have upgraded brake packages. The Chevy's brakes are much larger, front and rear. But not to discount the Ford Mustang GT with its Brembo brakes, because they do have one advantage. And that's immediate pedal bite. The Chevy's brake pedal is linear. You push the brake pedal a little bit, you get a little bit of braking. You push the brake pedal a lot, you get a lot of braking. And that's obviously a much easier way to drive a car, especially when you're on the limits of grip. On the flip side, when you're driving on the street, the Ford feels much more immediate because the brake pedal, the brake bite is right there. And it makes it harder to modulate, but it does give you that sort of sense of confidence when you're on a canyon road. The brakes are right there all the time, ready to rock. So I know I keep mentioning the powertrains, but man, they are so different. This Chevy, if you ever miss a gear, is 100% your fault. In the Ford, if you miss a gear, well, it's about 60-40. 60% of the time, it's the Mustang's fault. 40% of the time, it's your fault. Which again, just leads to ultimate driver confidence in the Chevy. This is a car that you can daily drive, take to the best canyon roads in the world, go to the racetrack, and it's going to be amazing in all of them. By comparison, the Ford's Performance Pack, at least the Performance Pack 1, really just seems to be more of like a fun daily driver performance pack. It doesn't seem to offer as much of a comprehensive redesign or a comprehensive thought as to what performance driving is all about. It seems to just be that Ford looked at a couple options they had in the parts bin and said, yeah, we can put this in the car and offer for a few $1,000s more money. Versus this thing, you know, the General Motors Performance Management team, the Camaro team, they spent a lot of time working on this, and it shows. Good. But there is no way that Ford can hang with the Chevy. Not on a back road. Definitely not at the track. This thing is just perfect. In terms of driver's cars, it's no contest. The Chevy is so much better. Oh! God, that's such a good sound. Oh, the more I drive this car, the more I want one. It's just so good. From the perfect powertrain, to the incredible steering, to the amazing grip and handling. When it comes to the Mustang GT Performance Pack versus the Camaro SS 1LE, the clear winner, and by a long shot, is the Camaro SS 1LE. I need to figure out how to buy one of these things. Oh! I need one of these in my life so bad. So bad. Oh, I love you, Camaro. You are so good. When am I gonna give up working on these stupid BMWs and just buy a Chevy? Oh, this is really good. Oh boy. Sorry, Ford. I need a Performance Pack 2 because Performance Pack 1 just cannot hang with the 1LE. I've heard good things about the Performance Pack 2, so hopefully I can get into one soon. Because right now, this thing is the top dog by a lot. A lot, a lot. Like, holy shit, a lot. God damn, I love this thing. Oh, this is an amazing, amazing automobile. Thank you, Chevy, for making something like this. You didn't have to, but I'm glad you did.